Good day, listeners. My name is Dr. Ryan Todd. I'm your host for Beyond the Checkbox. If you are a leader, a CEO in HR, you are a manager, and you expect more from the mental health of your organization, this is the podcast for you. Today, we are joined by the esteemed Sheldon Kennedy. For those of you who have been living under a rock, Sheldon Kennedy is an Order of Canada recipient. He has led multiple initiatives that has advocated for children, advocated for victims of abuse. He has started the Respect Group. They have now certified 1.3 million people in bullying, harassment, and discrimination training across the country. So a true leader in the mental health space, a true leader in sport organization, and we are very honored to have you on today. So thank you, Sheldon.
Oh, thank you, Ryan. It's great to be here. I don't know about whatever fancy word you use there, esteemed leader, but you know what?
I think once you get the Order of Canada, you get to be called esteemed.
I don't
That's
know
how
about that,
works.
but
yeah.
you just try to do the right thing and somehow you end up in places that you never thought you'd be.
I imagine you didn't think you'd be in this particular place when you kind of track back your career, right? Like you won a Memorial Cup, you won a World Junior Gold Medal, you played 8 years in the show, and then you came out with charging your assailant and just flipped the hockey world on its ear. And I wonder if you could go back to Sheldon Kennedy then, if you knew where this would have gone. Like if you could see, you know what, this is the start of something really special, or were you just trying to do the right thing kind of day by day? Do you recall the moments around when you were turning the hockey world upside down? Do you recall what that was like?
Well, yeah, I mean, I do, and I can tell you that it wasn't planned. I didn't have a plan. I didn't think I'd be sitting here chatting with you today after certifying 1.3 million people or Order of Canada or whatever. I just needed to address it or I was going to die. And that's basically where we were at. And, my life was not in a good place. I mean, I was in and out of psych wards, treatment centers. It was real. And, I had a young daughter at the time. Ryan was, not even a year old, and when she was born coming into this world, and I just knew that if I didn't deal with this issue and get myself healthy and try to stop Graham James from hurting others, that I just wanted to be the best dad I could be and the best person I could be, I was never going to get there unless I dealt with this. So no, Ryan, there was never a plan. I did what was in front of me. I tried to do the right thing, and basically, Graham James was with the Calgary Hitmen, and I used to see him after the Flames games with these young kids, and I just, I needed to put a stop to that, knowing what I know.
What I didn't know is that he would potentially not have ever been charged if you didn't step up. Like there was a situation there where he could have continued to hurt a lot of young athletes and people if you didn't do what you did. Is that true?
Well, absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, if you look
Yeah.
at Graham James' history, I mean, he was charged back in the 70s. And I don't think he was stopping after Sheldon Kennedy. Actually, we know he wasn't. I mean,
Wow.
There's 6 people that have come forward now. But, yeah, I mean, I guess somebody else could have came forward. But, I think for me, I needed to bring to light what was happening. And I think it was so misunderstood because, my whole life I was portrayed as this drunk, this kid that was a troublemaker, this kid that failed out of school, that really Graham was my mentor and he was supposedly a school teacher, and he was the guy that was really going to turn this troubled kid around. Right. And I wasn't a troubled kid before I met Graham. But I did. I lived right. I played right into that narrative, and knowing what I know today, I mean, what was going on in my world with the abuse and all of that. I mean, it's clear to me, the drinking, the drugging, the depression, the self-harm, you name it. I mean, all of, you take the list of impacts and, and I could check all those boxes. But at the time we looked at that as, this poor kid, he's troubled kid, right? Hanging around with the wrong crowd. Wow. Right? I mean, that's basically the way I was looked at, right? Failing out of school.
And that's that's the simple narrative that people glom onto, and it's easy, right? Troubled kid, here's a savior, and then when you come out and say that's not at all how it was, that would have been tumultuous. I imagine you had a lot of people telling you to stop talking.
Yeah, well, I mean, there was some articles that came in and some former teammates that, took Graham's side. And I get it today. I mean, I understand that people
took his...
Yeah, I mean, I understand that, people would question it because, Sheldon was this troublemaker, right? And Graham was the super... I mean, don't forget, Graham James was Hockey Man of the Year in the Hockey News magazine. Out of anybody else in the world in hockey, he was Hockey Man of the Year, and that was after we had a bus accident. I was on the bus in Swift Current, and we had four players died, and
you were on that bus.
I was on that bus, yeah, and so I mean, it's very clear that Graham didn't let anybody get any type of treatment after that. It was, he didn't want people to disclose what was really going on there. It wasn't, there was quite widely known that there was a perceived this was happening. People didn't know how to address it.
It was widely known.
Well, I used to get bugged by other teams and coaches in the Western League about being shacked up with Graham, and yeah, I mean, I used to get teased about that throughout my junior career for sure. People just didn't understand it. I think they might have thought that it was a mutual relationship, which it wasn't, and and then we want to really blame pedophilia on homosexuality, right? A lot of times back then, especially. So, and I think that it was very confusing, and I think as a young kid growing up in a really small town in Saskatchewan, in Manitoba, right on the border of Manitoba, Saskatchewan. I mean, I'd never heard of this stuff in my life. Right? I'd never heard of anything like what happened to us. And it's like, so how do you talk about it? How do you try to explain to somebody what's happening, right? When your whole life you're scoring the game-winning goal in Game 7 on a breakaway, right, to win a championship, right? So, and now you're fulfilling a dream. You're made to feel special. Oh my God, I get to play in the Western League at 15, and the person that's groomed your mother and your brother, and now all of a sudden is sneaking around at night with the windows all taped off, approaching your bed. So as a young kid, going from the way I felt into that had significant impact in my life, and it still has an impact in my life. I need to manage it, and I need to pay attention to it because, I lived most of my teenage years, being abused by Graham James, right? So living in the fear of when is he going to touch me next? What's going to happen? So you're constantly just waiting in that angst moment of, and then the secret. Like who's going to find out what's going to happen, and then numbing the secret, because I think that, it's like, yeah, if there's some things happen, but then you live a life that brings its whole other pile of shame and guilt on the way that you treat people because of what's happened to you, right? And so it just keeps piling on, and it's, and I think that's what I've really learned over my time is that the impact is real, and it's really about mental health. Like, it's the mental health impact of these incidences that really shape people. Yes, the incident is hurtful, but it's what you're left with that you have to deal with that changes your life and shifts your life in negative and positive ways. There
was something you said in the documentary that you did, you were talking to two young people, and you said how you feel makes total sense based on what you experienced. And I had watched that, when I was training, early on training as a psychiatrist, and that line was so perfect because it's widely applicable to a large range of, people who have been victims of abuse. But it's clear that that's true, right? And I think that's what people miss maybe, right? That how you feel now and your experience and how you're treating others, that's actually totally normal given what you were exposed to, like what you had to undertake as a young person. It makes total sense, the outcomes. They actually, it'd be surprising if that wasn't the outcome.
Well, and that's where we've really tried to do our work, like not our work, but I mean, really tried to shift the way we think around this. Instead of trying to label it, even though I know we have to label it, we're trying to get the focus around the impact. What's the impact? What are we left with, right? Instead of spending so much time on trying to find out what the right word is, it's like, okay, what are we really dealing with here? And, we know the numbers. I mean, at the former Sheldon Kennedy Child Advocacy Center, now the Calgary Child Advocacy Center, they do all the child abuse investigations. Well, who was coming in front of us? I mean, yeah, we were investigating a child abuse case, as bad as and as, as ugly as they are. But at the end of the day, we're dealing with these kids that are struggling with real mental health and emotional challenges, like the self-harming, the addictions, all the acting out, the anxiety, the depression. I mean, all of that. And I was no different. And I think what I know about this stuff is that and I always try to go back to so for me, it's like scars last a lifetime. Okay. Well, I know what that is now. I do believe that those scars last a lifetime, but I also know that there's a way through it, right? And I think we have to learn and we have to listen to people that are living in good recovery and have certain things and certain tools in their life on a daily basis that they do to set themselves up for success. And I don't think we hear enough of those stories. But I really think that there's lots of people that I've talked to that have been in terrible situations and have, been in the, feeling like it's over, that have found a way out. And I think, it's not, oh, I'm here now, we're good to go. I think what I've learned, it's like you need to manage when you're feeling good. You need to manage that time and those feelings just as much as you have to manage when you're in the dumps. Because when I stop doing what works for me, I go right back there. I don't know why, but I do. So, again, and I look at, whether it's these issues that we talk about or if it's mental health that we're talking about, I don't speak a lot of it like in my work, but it's no secret. I've been in frickin' 8 treatment centers, right? I was playing in Detroit and I got sent down to Rockville, Maryland, which is a lockdown frickin' mental health psych ward. Right. And I was in a lockdown psych ward for a month and a half. And that was how they thought they'd try to fix Sheldon. Right. Nobody ever asked me what had happened. Right. It was like, just get him to quit drinking. Right. Yeah. So anyway, it's, I've kind of been on that side. I've seen all those, I've seen the systems. Right. And, yeah, and I don't think I got any type of reprieve from the way I felt until I actually could get really honest about what happened to me and then my part in how I lived because of what happened to me and people I hurt along the way, right? Because I'm struggling with addiction and not showing up at, my daughter's birthday party because I'm drunk somewhere or whatever. Like that stuff has huge impact as well around shame and guilt as a father, which I think sometimes we never get to. We want to deal with what happened, but we never get to our part, right? And I think that that's really important. And I think what I've learned is that the issues don't really differ. If we can get to the point of how does this make you feel, right? I think that's our that's our common language around incidences, whatever they may be, right? And I think that the feeling is quite common. I've had, I can't even tell you how many disclosures I've got and I continually get. And, the time, the place, the incident was different, but the impact was very consistent.
Disclosure, what do you mean?
Disclosures of, child abuse or sexual abuse. Like when I
Sure.
rollerbladed across the country, we were on average getting 20 disclosures a day, right?
Wow.
So it's like, and then how do you deal with that? And we still get them. And, or can you help them get my son or daughter off the street? Or can you, and all that stuff's just, kind of side work for me, and not even work. I mean, I try to help as best I can and try to point people to where they can get help. But when I first started doing this in '98 and I was rollerblading across the country, I thought I had to fix everybody, right? I took it on, right? Like I have to take on this pain. I have to get them better, and I carried that, and I near killed me. And I've learned to listen and to understand that I can't fix people. I can give them tools and make suggestions for them to do the work to get well, right? And but I mean, frick, I had to learn that 22 years ago. That one almost took me out. I mean, I was in, and I also felt that, I hope I'm not rambling here.
No, there's so much to go on, right? It's very gripping. So just keep chatting. What I do want to put a pin in, which is that self-care piece. Like you had to take that on, and what we hear from leaders, and you likely do from the Respect group work that you do, is, well, what if everyone comes out with a mental health issue? What if we get all these people coming out and saying, I've been abused, I've been bullied, I have a mental health issue? Like, how do we take that on? Like, what happens if the thing you're offering and what you're offering exposes all this stuff? Like, essentially, I couch that as like, how am I going to handle it? And you went through a process of that because you rollerbladed across the country and you exposed years and years of abuse, and you took all that on. And so take me through that a little bit, because that's really impactful. I think the message I'm thinking for leaders is like, you don't have to take it on. You don't need to fix. You need to listen, but you don't need to fix.
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, if you look at the shift, I mean, we've had a significant culture shift. I would think that we've played a part in this conversation. We've started having these conversations 22 years ago. We learned about it, and I think, when I look at these issues within a workplace or within a sport organization or within a community, it's about leadership. And these issues, I believe, need to be brought up and cultivated from the grassroots. But we've also got to show, as leaders, we need to show that these issues are a priority within our organization. And what I found is that, a lot of times, the issues, people don't like. I mean, if I'm getting 25 disclosures a day, right? People didn't want to come forward with that. They just needed a safe place to tell their story, right? And so if I look at this, and if we can create a culture and teach people, right, how to discuss, right, within their teams or within their groups, or have these conversations. How's it going? Right? How's it going today? What's going on? Right? Let's chat about here. We're going to have a team meeting, and we're going to learn to talk about mental health, or we're going to learn to talk about civility, or we're going to learn to talk about all the different types of abuse. But I think what I've learned is that these issues carry significant amounts of fear to all walks of society. Right? Not just leaders, everybody. People don't even know where to start to have this conversation. I mean, in your line of work, Ryan, I mean, you must see this. I mean, you probably take, I don't know how many times if you're dealing with a client, I mean, it must take you, and you went to school for a long time to learn how to draw this out of people. So, if that's not our skill set, and we're people don't know where to start. And I know that when I started talking about this stuff, I didn't even know how to explain it to people. I didn't even know what it was. I started questioning everything. And I think that conversations is about practice. I think we have to practice having conversations around, these types of issues. And I think that's how we build a confidence. And as a leader, I think we need to facilitate those. But I think the reality is we need to get to a place of confidence and clarity on what we're talking about when it comes to, abuse, bullying, harassment, discrimination, civility, mental health, mental illness, and the difference between those two, right? And I mean, all of the above. But right now, we're saying do this, do that, do this, talk. But I think that there's not a lot that's coming after that. Yeah. And there's not a lot of teachings that come with it. And I think that's what I've learned is that, it takes practice to learn how to share in a group or with another individual, whether it's at work or at home. And, and I think, for me, I've had lots of years of practice learning how to share. And that's what works for me to keep me somewhat sane.
And you talk about practice like you would talk about how to practice like a power play or skating well. And the narrative I find right now really frustrating is that it's all about let's just openly talk. And I agree. I don't think people know how to talk or what to even talk about. And the stigma has been reduced in the workplace and in all of our communities around mental health. And now what? Like how do you have those conversations? And I think people are getting stuck there. And the thing I find frustrating, and I don't know if you would agree with this, is the push continues to be on let's just talk more. Like more about who knows what or what, like there's no structure, there's no practice around it. And how do you change that? Like how do you try and switch that narrative so it's not just talk? It's like, let's talk in a certain way about a certain thing so we can practice and build skill.
Yeah. Well, I absolutely agree. I mean, I don't think we need to be, walking around with the mental health banner, waving it from the tops of buildings to have people in our country, understand that the majority of our people understand that this is important. I think that what we need a focus. We need a strategy and we need a focus around, these issues, mental health, and what does that look like? And we need to start teaching people, how to have these conversations within an organization. We need to start, teaching leaders, what this might look like, right? And I think that to me, this is culture shift. We have come a long ways. Like what I know about where we were 22 years ago, right? And if I look at, where we are today, we've made significant strides by, leaders such as yourself and Headversity. And I mean, the list goes on of people that are doing great work in this space. But what I think we need is that, it's almost like for 22 years, we've gone out and gathered up those bingo balls, right? We got all the bingo balls in the machine. Now we need to actually spell the word. We need to spell the plan. And I think we felt good about, talking about this stuff for once. And now I think it's about, structure around it. And we're starting to see legislation somewhat around it. But I think as, people are scared, and it's a myth that if we make this a priority within our organization or within our sport, that we're going to have this flood of disclosures. And we never saw that, right? We never saw that. We've seen people come forward. We've seen organization have to deal with things. Yes, people have come forward, but it's not this overwhelming flood of disclosures that are going to overwhelm you. I look at the workplace personally, and I think, the workplace, I mean, you can't control what people are bringing into the workplace. So if we know the stats and we know the numbers, we know that there's a lot of stuff that's coming into the workplace, that the workplace is the one that needs to deal with it, right? And so as leaders, it's not just having an unhealthy workplace or, doing this in our workplace. It's like, what's coming into our workplace? What is this individual dealing with at home? What is this individual deal? Is it Sheldon Kennedy that's gone through, years of abuse and addiction problems, and they haven't quite got there to a place of, feeling okay, and they're still dealing with it? Like, where does that manifest itself, right? That manifests itself in the workplace.
You put a responsibility on leadership, and is there, I mean, it's a shared responsibility. We hear a handful of studies that have come out and said, if you're going to put money, if you have $1 to spend, you should maybe put it toward leadership or management. I wonder if we're putting too much on leaders, because what I've realized in my work, in working with executives, and also, our work with adversity, is leaders are people. And we kind of put executives on a different echelon of person. Like, they're highly intelligent, they have, they're highly paid, they have, high emotional intelligence, and they can handle it. Why? Because, they're leaders. That's what they do. Do you ever think that, is there an argument to be made that we're putting too much on leadership? We're putting, it's more shared, and we need to give people who aren't leaders responsibilities too.
Yeah. Well, I think when I talk about leadership, I mean, right now we're dealing with it in their company at HR. So it's not like they're not dealing with it.
Yeah.
It's right. You deal with it, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes the reports get to the CEO and sometimes not, right? But at the end of the day, they are dealing with it anyway. They're dealing with it with policies, procedures, HR. And I think when I talk about a leader, I mean, to me, a leader in a organization, and what I view as strong leadership, is about clear vision, right? Clear priorities for an organization, and somebody that has his finger on the pulse. And I think when we are looking at, a mission and a vision and the priorities of a company, that's where I think leadership can really make a difference. This doesn't mean that the leader is the one that has to go out and sit in front of, individuals and listen to their stories. But I think when issues become priorities within an organization through leadership, that's when change happens. And that's what I see. And I think being in that leadership role, that's what they can bring. Now, that said, it's going to be up to, other management, and it's going to be up to the individual. I look at getting well from these issues. It's my responsibility, right?
That's interesting. Yeah.
And
yeah.
I have to be accountability for my actions. I have to be accountable to seek help when needed. I have to be, I have to be accountable.
How do you instill that responsibility? How do you teach that responsibility? Because I think that's really important. Yeah. To have that individual be responsible for their own wellness.
Well, and I think, Ryan, like when you go back to leadership, it's about creating that structure of safety and creating trust, so that when we're talking about that, it's accountability. But I mean, think of this: how many times across our country do we tell people, go talk, and they can't get in to see anybody for months, right? Anywhere, not just a doctor, counselors, for months they can't. So when that happens, we almost go backwards. Right? So I think that, and that's just what I've learned. I mean, what I learned is I was at every doctor, every top treatment centers in the world. Like, I was at those places, and what I learned is that the only person that's gonna save me is me. But what can happen is that, when I look at the NHL, Doc Shaw, when I look at, there's some people in my life that really guided me to places and gave me some tools for me to do the work on. And I think when I look at leaderships and I look at companies, we can create that guiding structure so that if somebody does come forward right? They're going to feel that they've been listened to, they've been heard, and that something's been done. That always doesn't mean that this person is going to get fired, but I think what people want to see is that they were heard and they were listened to. And I think that's about company structure. And I think we need to get to that place, because I think that's the way people are feeling, is that they're not heard.
So that responsibility of creating the structure where people are heard and can be guided towards something, that is a leadership responsibility.
That's a leadership responsibility.
You're also saying that you are responsible for your own wellness.
Well, I don't know who else is going to take care of my wellness.
I think that's I think it's a novel message, actually. I think we're putting a lot of, like we always talk about the mental health system, and I don't really know what that is. And we put a lot on the system. The system, and I need help, and where do I get help, and I can't, and that's true. And how do we empower that person to help themselves? Like that's where the bullet has to hit the bone at this point,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, I mean, what I've learned about this stuff is that, when I was like, what I learned from a young kid, when I got hurt, I break my toe, I need stitches, I need this, I go to the hospital and they fix it. Right? What I've also learned through this journey of trying to get well and battling through, my mental health struggles and depression and, all of it, is that when I go to the hospital, they don't fix it, right? They can help guide, and they can help point, and they can help lessen, but it's not about fixing, right? And I've learned that, and it wasn't until I started to take control of my own actions and little baby steps. What am I going to do today to get better? Right? What am I going to do today that's going to be a little win for me? Right? And I don't know how we're going to teach that, but I think what it comes with is that if we look at, most people that I know, and I'll talk about myself, when you're abused, when you're constantly being, pointed out, or or you're bullied, or there's things going on in your life, you have low self-esteem, right? Whether it's in the workplace or outside of the workplace, coming in, you don't trust, and I never trusted. So how are we ever going to trust, people? I mean, we have to be able to somehow create the structure to build that trust up for people to feel confident, to be able to not be a bystander, to be able to, come forward with the way that they may be feeling off. And I think ultimately the goal is let's not wait till this, stack of dynamite blows up and deal with it. Let's try to teach people how to, be able to connect with the way that they feel, and to be able to share how they feel before it blows up. And I think that's ultimately, what I've learned, and that's basically the tools that I try to keep with me, is like, I know when I don't deal with things and try to get ahead of them, I know where it takes me. Exercise is important for me. Being honest with the way I feel, right?
That's really hard to do. Why, first of all, why do you think that's so damn hard to do? And then how do we teach that skill?
Yeah. Well, I think it's like, again, I've had a lot of practice at this. And I was never, I wasn't always good at it, and I'm okay at it now. But I mean, I'm going to give you an example, right? Like, there's lots of times in my life when, even today, in today's world, and it seems to, that I guess the periods become stretched out, right? Like, I used to get suicidal thoughts, like, they'd stick with me for 3 weeks, then they'd leave for 3 weeks, and they'd come back. And the more I would work and chat those out, the longer periods of time I would get in between them coming back. But one thing I do know is this: when they do come into my life and they do creep into my head, today, I got to take a look and see what's going on. But this is what I know: if I can be honest with that feeling to somebody, they lose their power. And that's what I know. And for
The
me,
feelings lose their power.
yeah, like that feeling of that thought loses its power in my head. And, but I have to be able to share that with somebody.
How did you learn that? Like, I think that is such.
Well, like because I was like desperate, right? I got desperate in a desperate situation, and I needed to be able to do that. And then, and I had an individual to tell me. They say, you need to tell me if those thoughts come up again. And so I just knew over time that when I can share about that, they lost their power in my head. And when I didn't share about them, they gained power. And I know that it's like they just kept gaining steam, right? And I could never get rid of them until I could be honest about the way I feel. And I never shared them because it's shameful. And it's shameful, and it's shows weakness. And it's not that I was thinking about that stuff at the time, but when I can look back at it, that's probably exactly what it was. And, and it's like, frickin' here's Sheldon Kennedy getting Order of Canada, like whatever, not whatever. I mean, I look at those types of awards and any awards that I've received, and it's about the issues, right? Sheldon Kennedy happens to be a name associated with it,
Sure.
but it shows
Yeah, yeah.
it shows us where we're getting to with, but it's how can I have those thoughts?
Yeah, and I wonder if you had, because you were and continue to be the forefront leader on an issue like that. I wonder if you ever think like, how could I be weak or how could I be damaged when I'm like elevated, and you've been elevated to a part of, our society where you are a leader, you're looked upon, relied upon. How can you still have those thoughts? And that might play a mental game with you too, right?
Yeah, I mean, it does, but I think, I'm learning so much about like stress and vicarious trauma, right? I mean, I look at all the disclosures I've had, and I continually get, and and death, and being being one of the first kind of responses as a public voice around the Humboldt stuff, and I look at all that stuff, and all of that stuff, and it's not that I'm glad I was able to do it, but I think what I'm learning is that it's taken its toll, right? And it's taken its toll, and I think when you and making sure I'm showing up for the kids, and I mean, I can't even tell you how many just like investigations. So we look at our frontline people, like you look at frontline police officers or that are investigating these kids, and and it impacts them, right? And I think for me, like, I've made a decision to step back a little bit because it's impacted me, sure. Right? And at least I can recognize that, but I think I don't have to be perfect to be a leader. I think I need to make sure that I'm doing everything that I can to address, to be as healthy as I can be every day. That doesn't mean being perfect, right? That means, grinding through the tough times, try not to get overexcited in the good times. But, it's not all roses, right? Like it's, being a leader is not easy. Being a leader, I think, is tough. And, making sure that we keep showing up. And there's lots of times when I'm like, I don't want to show up, but I show up.
The leadership thing is really interesting. And we talk a lot about authentic leadership, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around exactly what that is. I think you're pointing to, a pretty clear understanding, right? As a leader, you do have to show up, but you don't have to be perfect. And to be able to verbalize that and also show a vision and a steadiness that I think is important in leadership, I think is so incredibly hard. And you were talking to Curtis Stange last week, and we had him on the podcast, and I would think what was so impressive is that he can show some of that authenticity and still have a vision and be steady. And that balance is, I think, so incredibly difficult because, if you're the CEO of a bank or you're the leader of a very powerful and important movement, like yourself, you can't unravel per se, but you have to be authentic and real and keep yourself healthy. So that balance is something that I can't always quite get my head around. But what I like and what you've articulated is that, look, you don't have to be perfect, but you have to show up.
Yeah. Well, and, leadership is about accountability. And I think with these issues are all about accountability. Right? We have to be personally accountable to get well. And I think as a leader, I think we have to be accountable to our own well-being and making sure that we take care of ourselves. And I also think that, we need to be honest. Just honest with where we're at, right? Like, I think for the first few years, when I rollerbladed across the country and when I disclosed and stuff, I was struggling, and I don't think it's, I went two longest stints of treatment. I never really got any type of real good recovery till after the rollerblade, after about 4 years, after I was Newsmaker of the Year in this country, right? And I was really struggling because, but what I realized is that, I was just telling a story, right? And I think there's telling a story, so, and then if you can try to, get yourself well, you found a way out, and you can really teach then, because now the conversation doesn't really just stick around what happened. It gets into more, what did you do and where are we going? And I think that that's important. And I think, to me, it's about being vulnerable. And I think as leaders, we have to show a little bit of vulnerability, because that's relatable to people. People can relate to that a little bit. And I don't know. I know that, I just know it is so important to get down and sit down and go around and say hi to people and call them by their names and how you doing today and how you feeling, and look them in the eyes and, stand at that elevator and say good morning to everyone, right? Get to know them. And I think that's important. And it's just little things like that, and that's what I tried to do and and I think it worked, and people say thank you, and little acts of kindness, little here and there, and show people you care, and that and it kind of comes out of nowhere, and it's not, it doesn't have to be this big thing, and but I've had great mentors in my life. Wayne's a great mentor,
Talk a little bit about Wayne. So you started the Respect Group. And like we mentioned, right, 1.3 million people certified bullying, harassment, abuse, and discrimination training, foundational industry standard training now. I know Wayne. He's an interesting character. And so tell me about how the two of you met and like how this grew.
Well, Wayne was part owner of a microbrewing company back 23 years ago, I guess it was. Yeah. And I can't remember the name of it. Bow Valley Brewing Company. And he sponsored a hole at a golf tournament after I disclosed what was going on, and we were raising money for the Sheldon Kennedy. Anyway, I broke my femur in 8 places. And so I was not
playing golf.
Not golfing. Yeah, exactly. Hey, yeah.
Classic golf injury.
I missed a putt and jumped off the ledge. No, but anyway, we got rained out, so I ended up sitting up at the beer hole with them. But and Wayne and I have not been weren't drinking buddies, but we became friends. And Wayne's been a mentor to me, and he was the volunteer president of our foundation when I rollerbladed across the country, and he made the transition to shut down the Child Advocacy Center and donate our money to the Red Cross. And then a few years later, it really came out of the work that we'd done with that money and the work that we were looking at with Red Cross and sports systems saying we need help. Hockey, because they were training 22 years ago. It was the Speak Out program. So Wayne's background was technology, and so we decided to put these issues online, and our whole mindset shifted to trying to reach the 98% of really good people, empower the bystander, find a language that is understandable, really simplify these issues for organizations and try to build a confidence. And yeah, Wayne's a good friend, and him and his wife Dana and their kids have been instrumental in my life, and you need those people in your life. Any of the stuff that we talked about previously in this podcast, you can't do alone. I've had great people in my life that have stuck with me, that have helped me, that have been there, and Wayne's one of them. I mean, we've been in business now 18 years, and it's fun, but we've seen change. I mean, we used to get kind of laughed out. Who are these two guys with this little online abuse bullying program wheeling around to come in for a meeting, right?
So you did the sales and you went to business and
oh my God, we were back and forth across this country. We were on I think we had 48 meetings in a
this was before Zoom.
17 day road trip from coast to coast. Yeah. Oh yeah, we've been face to face, and we believe in face to face. We believe that you need to sit face to face. We think that that's absolutely critical. Yeah, we're in the technology world, but I think that it's still about relationships. You've got to create relationships with individuals, and we got to, customer service is critical, and that's where we focus. And we've been, we've had great leaders across the country that said, yeah, this is important. And they took a risk on us, and we had to deliver, and we've learned lots. And now, we just had a great summit. We felt action summit here, which I felt was quite successful. In the workplace space, and being able to have those conversations, and I think sport has broken trail here a lot on a lot of things they've done. Obviously still space to grow.
Why is that? Like, sport seems to, maybe in this country, maybe in North America, I find maybe less so in Europe, but sport, if you can get a message across in sport, recently in the last 10 years, it was around homophobia. And I think there's a lot of really great organizations that led the way in anti-homophobia training in sport, and then bullying, harassment, discrimination, sexual abuse. I think mental health is kind of that next layer sport needs to lead the way. Why do you think sport is an easy way to get into that? And then why do people listen when sport is involved?
I think your leaders in sport, your top athletes in any sport, they have a lot of following, so there's a lot of, people idolizing them and look up to them. But I also think sport in our country, if you look at a lot of the leaders in business, they're coaching, or their kids are in sport or whatever, right? So, very few boardrooms in this country you would go in that haven't taken Respect in Sport or Respect in Sport parent program. Somebody's taken it. And so, and the whole reason we built Respect in Workplace was because we had coaches that were volunteering across this country, and not just hockey. Like, we have 51 sports that are our clients nationally, said we need this in the workplace. That's how we created the workplace program.
So you started with sport.
Started in Respect in Sport to train coaches, and those volunteer coaches have been in workplaces across this country, and they said, geez, we need something like this in our workplace. So that's how we started. That's how we developed that. But I think, and I got to give hockey kudos in this. And, they are doing a lot in this space. And for 22 years, they were training their coaches, right, on Speak Out. Was it perfect? No. But you know what? And then, Speak Out was, and then for us, the last 18 years. So Speak Out 4 years, and then us, we've been training, mandatory training for every coach across this country. And in a lot of places, it's parents and officials. And so, they are doing their part to shift the conversation to, and I think there's been a major shift, right? I think that there's been a positive shift. There's no question. And, hockey seems to always get the rap because it makes the headlines in our country. It's our number one sport. So I can tell you that the same issues that are happening in hockey are happening in other sports. But, they're all addressing it one way or another. And I think part of thing that's clear across the board and was clear at our Action Summit with 130 workplaces in this province was that foundational training around these issues is absolutely huge. Because there is no confidence, there's no line in the sand, there's no clarity about what are we really talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And it kind of comes full circle to our initial discussion around hockey, right? Like hockey does get the rap. There seems to be some sort of, just the cultural importance of hockey in our country.
Yeah.
So if you can make change there, you can kind of make change anywhere as per the, you've modeled that out with respect. You first started with sport and now you've reached millions of people with your workplace kind of organization training. So it's been very impressive.
Yeah. It's been an interesting journey. We've learned lots along the way, and I think that's just, it goes back to, no different than, once we have the structure, right? You can put it in place and you can tweak it. But when it becomes, and if you look at, it's like, okay, this is what we're going to, but, we had to tweak it, and we constantly tweak to get better all the time. But until we actually put in that structure of this is what we're going to do in our business, this is how we're going to go about it, we didn't have the chance to tweak. And I think, if we look at, we listen to our clients. Clients tell us how we can get better, right? Our partners tell us what they need, and we can work with them to get better. And I think if you look at that concept, which I think is relatable in most businesses, right? That's kind of the same concept that we're talking about when it comes to mental health.
Yeah.
Right? We create that structure in our organization, but then we need to listen to what's working, what's not. Can we make some tweaks here? Maybe not this one, but this one, yes, absolutely. This is something that's doable. And I think that's what we're talking about. I mean, we have trained 1.3 million people because we've listened to people, we've delivered, we've shown up. We dig in and solve problems. And to me, I think if we can take that type of mindset into the space of mental health and social issues, or, I think it would go far.
Yeah, we also believe so, and we really appreciate you being such a leader in this space. One thing that Wayne McNeil, the co-founder of Respect Group, told me was, once I had met Sheldon, my life changed forever. And you carry that gravitas with you, and we are very appreciative of you coming in and talking about all this with us in such an open, authentic, real way and moving this journey forward. So thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Yeah, well, thank you, Ryan, and keep up the great work. I know Headversity well, and I know the great work that you're doing, and I know we're aligning on some things which I think is going to be important for all.
Yeah, I'm very excited to keep working together.
Yeah, thank you.